You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by Nax. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
We have some stories that we're going to tell about great food at the gas station today. And we are once again joined by a storyteller who is one of the most popular podcast episodes we had. In fact, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, he's probably going to pass Mike Rowe in terms of downloads. So welcome to today's program, Stafford Shurden. He is a farmer, restaurant owner, and also the creator and co-host of a video series called Tailgate Gas Station Review, which is popular online and obviously popular with our listeners. So welcome once again, Stafford.
You know, I'm glad to be back, and mentioned with Mike Rowe, that's pretty cool. I'm a big fan of Mike's.
Well, obviously, you struck a nerve with talking the first time we had you. You talked about gas station chicken in particular. Today, we're going to expand a little across all kinds of cuisines and talk a little bit about how Gas Station Tailgate Review has kind of struck a nerve with people. Just for those who didn't hear the previous episode, just give us a recap of what you do when you hit the road.
So I started out just in Mississippi, but I go all over the South now and have kind of gotten out of the South a little bit. But I go to gas stations and eat really good food at gas stations. And I think the beauty of it is what people don't expect it. And then especially the little small towns, the people from there love to see their hometown on Facebook or YouTube or wherever I put it.
So how do you find these things? I know one of the things that we talk about in our industry is how are you searchable as a business, whether it's the products you have or whether it's your business itself. What's your trick to finding some of these places that you've had this amazing food?
So when I started, I just went to the places that I knew of that were close to me. And it was kind of crazy because immediately I started getting a large following. And now it's all word of mouth. And, you know, social media is what my granddaddy did in business, and that's talk to everybody. You know, he didn't do advertisements. He just talked to the people that he knew. And now we just have a much bigger group of that. So it kind of works the same way. So all of these people are in this kind of community of people who love gas station food. And they're like, oh, well, if you like that burger, you need to try this place. And so 90% of the reviews I do today are from word of mouth through social media.
So there are 2,409 gas stations in Mississippi. And if I had to guess, you've probably gone to about 5% of them and eaten.
Not quite that much. I've done 130-something reviews that have made it on. So if I hit a bad spot, I don't publish that. Mm-hmm. And then when I first started, I did. And then, you know, I started this right before COVID. And then COVID hits, and the meaning of what I was doing changed a little bit because I'm in the restaurant business. I'm not a C-store, but I'm in the restaurant business. So a lot of C-stores are not just C-stores. They're full-fledged in the restaurant business. So I understand what people in this business are going through in terms of, you know, people didn't show up today or we didn't get the product we thought. And so I'm not, if it's not a great review, I don't put it out. So I've probably filmed about 150. But I put out like 133 or 34.
Now, I want to get to a couple quotes that I've seen in some of your videos online. But first, I want to stay on that for a second. You talking about having the deli and also being a farmer. What are the challenges that you faced? I think that others can also say, hey, yeah, that's me too. Is it just that labor? Is it supply chain? Is any of that made easier by being a farmer? Did I ask too many questions there?
It's labor first, is probably our first issue. And then second, supply chain. We can kind of work around the supply chain most of the time. I'm sure people in the industry are already figuring out the problem with potatoes. And what I keep hearing is they will run out. We will run out of potatoes. There will be none. So, you know, you look at that and your customer sometimes doesn't understand that. That's a huge issue, but the labor thing for me has been the most difficult because so many times we're shorthanded on the farm and in the restaurant the same day, which is kind of limited. I hadn't done as many reviews this summer because as the farming season's gone on, I've been pretty stretched thin, so I've done fewer and fewer reviews, but I've got 5 or 6 in the can, as they say. But that labor thing for me is the tough one.
So what are you growing, and any challenges with the weather or labor there?
So we've had a very dry year. We can irrigate 100% of our crops, and my T-shirts all say cotton, soybeans, and rice. I grew up on a cotton, soybean, and rice farm. So Shurden Farms for years was primarily cotton. In 2001, we kind of got away from cotton and we went strictly into grain. So now we grow soybeans, rice, and corn. Now, this particular year, with the issue with fertilizer, because there was a question if we were going to be able to get fertilizer, I went 100% soybeans. Made it a lot easier for me as, the labor shortage and all of that. But we've had a really dry year. We typically irrigate once or twice, maybe 3 times, and I've irrigated 8 times this year. So, that's an expense we really didn't want to have. Plus, that's one of the things that's kept me really busy this summer.
Yeah, I saw pictures online. It looked like things were nice and green, but, fingers crossed that everything, until harvest, you never know, right?
Yeah, we've got a beautiful crop, and I mean that ability to irrigate has been phenomenal because I've stayed on top of it and made sure those crops are growing really well. And I think for the most part, most areas of the country have a good crop, which is great. On that other side where your listeners and me are all in the food business, that is a good thing. Mm-hmm. So we look to have plenty of crops in the United States. There's going to be a global issue, but in the States, I think we're going to be fine.
Well, that's good to hear. And so let's transition to talking about some of my favorite quotes, or at least 3 quotes that I saw you online posting about some places you visited. There was a Valero station, and your quote was, "This makes me question everything you know about food." What do you mean by that, and what was special about that one?
So that's probably the Valero station was Rockin' Grub, which is means rockin', but raw. He uses fresh local raw ingredients. But we're talking about a real chef in a gas station cooking chef-inspired burgers and stuff like that. And it's, as much as I've traveled, I don't see a lot of that kind of stuff in gas stations. Most of what you see is the plate lunches, the fried chicken, we all know what typically you see. And then you get in this place, and it's like something that should be on the cover of a magazine. Which is crazy. Mm-hmm. And this guy layers his flavors, and I don't know, a lot of C-stores in the South, they come in and they'll have a cook come in the morning, do all their breakfast, fry all their chicken, put their chicken out, and then you've got an empty kitchen the rest of the day. And what this owner figured out, and the chef, was, I've got this empty kitchen, so he lets this chef come in and do his thing in this fully functional commercial kitchen. You go in any 5-star restaurant, the equipment's basically the same stuff. So the only difference is ingredients and talent. So, there's nothing stopping some of these C-stores from doing something very similar to that. And I guess that's what clicked with me is, you don't have to do meatloaf and fried chicken. You can do really cool stuff, and that's what they did.
Yeah, and that's something that we've heard with food trucks that have been tired of being chased with parking tickets, or having difficulty in finding a place to be for the day, or rain disrupts everything and nobody shows up. You've heard about some of them have located at gas stations and taken over something that previously was a sandwich prep area. You put in a high-grade all the kitchen equipment, and you can operate in roughly that same space. It's actually bigger than what they have in a food truck. And
absolutely,
and you see some of these places with just amazing food. Now, this guy wasn't breaking out the tweezers and stuff like that for putting the finishing touches on things, was he?
No, it was, you said food truck. That's the perfect comparison. You would totally expect to find this in a food truck. And, mm-hmm. But he was doing stuff like he layers flavors. He's doing, all his cheeses are smoked locally. His bread is made by a bakery down the street. He's grinding his own hamburger meat. He went way above and beyond in making sure every element of whatever he's putting in front of you, he thought about every single ingredient on there and how does that add or take away from the dish. And that's something you see in a high-end restaurant, but it's I call it man food. It's a big old burger. At the end of the day, mm-hmm. It's a big old burger. And then you're just blown away. It's the best burger I've ever eaten is at that gas station right there.
So when you consume the food, you watch all these Food Network shows or whatever station, and you have to have that reaction. How do you think about, you're going to say something positive because it's good, because you read the reviews. You're trying to enjoy it. You're trying to communicate. How do you do all that? Take us behind the curtain.
I don't even think about it. I just eat it, and whatever comes out of my mouth comes out of my mouth. It's, I've always, I guess I got that from my mom. She's a talker. My dad was not so much of a talker, but, I'm rarely left absence of words. You know what I mean? So I just turn the camera on, eat it, and I think that's one of the things people like is that it's just gut reaction. It's not something I thought about, I'm going to say this. This is real. I mean, they talk about reality programming. Like there's no editor. It's just me. So what you see is what you get.
Camera, tripod, and truck. That's all you need. And some food.
Yeah, that's it.
So another quote that you had, you were at a place in Jefferson County, a Jefferson Country store, and you said you can't explain what these places like this mean to you. And want to elaborate upon that, because I think that touches a lot of things that relate to convenience stores and gas stations across the country.
Well, the world is changing. The South is changing. I live in Mississippi, and, you go to more and more, and some of it's a beautiful thing. I go to taquerias and gas stations in Mississippi now, which 15, 20 years ago you'd have never seen. So I don't want to lament that at all, because that's a beautiful thing. Those are great places. But at the same time, every now and then I'll step into a store, and it'll be like stepping into a time machine in a beautiful way. And you look at this one guy behind the counter that owns the store, is in there flipping burgers, and you can't, we're in a situation where I don't think you can recreate that. He's the third owner of this business. It's in the middle of nowhere on a little country road, literally 2 churches on either side of it. It's, kind of one of those. And again, just for me, it's like we had those kind of places in Drew when I grew up, and we don't have them anymore. And what's the likelihood that he's the last owner? Probably pretty great. So if you don't go now to places like that, there's a real likelihood you don't get to go to places like that. And
for folks that just, it recalls a different time, I think, for a lot of us. It's just like, wow, that was just amazing. And you do see some of these things come back. Somebody will recreate something in a different place or something like that. But yeah, you're probably right that if he doesn't have somebody that passes along, it'll become something else, something different, maybe something that has some positives. But those are kind of the treasures. And if I recall from that picture, there was a lot of stuff going on. It was a busy-looking place. It wasn't like, you look at some modern places and it's clean lines and very few signs. This was sensory overload, wasn't it?
Well, it's an old country store that we know in the South. And I have a theory about how some of these places came to being. We're rural, we're agriculture-based economies in the South. And you can go back, some of them before gas stations were around. They were commissaries. They were on-farm commissaries that sold a little bit of everything. You might even say general store. And then they progressed into selling gas, and then other things happened.
So I probably miss... Oh, okay. So that's the sound of business. So that's good.
Yeah, that's the sound of business, yeah.
So
hopefully that's somebody calling order food, right?
Well, either that or they're just suggesting where you should go on your next visit. So both good sounds. I want to go to your third quote that I liked is, and I misspoke on the number of gas stations in Mississippi. I gave you the number of convenience stores in Mississippi. The quick check here, and I go, and drum roll please, the number of gas stations in Mississippi is, where is it, 2,165. And that relates to your third quote where you talked about Mississippi is one big small town. And I guess that's what you see out on the road when you're hitting all these stores.
Well, everybody knows everybody here. And if you don't know somebody, you got mutual friends in common. There's only, I think, couple million people in Mississippi, if that, in the whole state. So most towns you go in outside of the Jackson metropolitan area, most towns are, we call a big town 10,000 people here, So, and just some funny stories. I was in a town 4 hours from my house, reviewing the gas station. Guy comes up behind me and goes, "Stafford Shurden?" I'm thinking I'm getting recognized from the review. I actually know the guy and did not know he owned that station. And that's the kind of things that happen. And then if you've watched the show Hometown with Ben and Aaron Napier, Ben Napier, who's a friend of mine, told me that's where I needed to go. So we had this big laugh about that. And it's like everybody knows everybody. It's hard to get away.
So you've also expanded, as I mentioned earlier, to different cuisines. You just posted something recently about you were looking for Vietnamese recommendations for Vietnamese food in some gas stations, and you found some. You had some great fried rice. Another place you were talking about how really good the deer sausage was at a store. So you're right. It's way more than mashed potatoes and meatloaf or something like that, fried chicken. You're finding all kinds of interesting things out there.
Yeah, and again, I do most of my reviews in Mississippi, but as much as it's one big small town, everybody knows everybody, there's subtle differences between different parts of the state. And the Gulf Coast is a perfect example of that. You've got this huge influx of Vietnamese fishermen. And a lot of them have done really well, and they've expanded into, there are several Vietnamese bakeries, restaurants, and now, of course, C-stores and gas stations. And so there's some great gas station food down there that's Vietnamese. And I had no idea of this, and a viewer turned me on to it, and a friend of mine that writes for the paper down there, and he says, "You've got to check out this Vietnamese food." So, that's one of the things I've been searching out. And then you go just an hour north, and you start getting a little more like Louisiana, and it's deer sausage at Vine Brothers. So and then you get into the Delta, it's all fried chicken, and you get over into the northeast part of the state, it's almost Appalachian. It's kind of amazing how if you don't travel, you don't know that there are these subtle differences. You just think everybody's like you know what I mean? But even in a small state like Mississippi, you do have that.
And you've taken your daughter on at least one of these trips. Do you have anybody else that says, "Hey, man, next time you hit the road, can I go with you? Can I be there and kind of experience the whole thing along with you?"
I have that. Actually, a lot of people ask me that, and I've taken my daughter, Mary Stafford, and I went 1,100 miles in my truck all the way to Key West, Florida, and which was a fun experience for both of us. And then my younger daughter's been to several with me, and I've had a few guests along the way. Jeremy London, who was in Party of Five, and some Guys and Generals and some other stuff, lived in Mississippi, and Wright Thompson, who writes for ESPN, has been on the show. So a good friend of mine, a businessman over in Cleveland, Mississippi, named Will Bradham, has been on the show. So I try to do that as much as I can. It's a little harder than you think getting everybody's schedule together. So that's why a lot of times it's my daughters, because I can just say, "Hey, come on, we're going somewhere."
So you alluded to earlier that you're from Drew, Mississippi, which of course is where Archie Manning's from, and there's been some other famous quarterbacks with the Manning name, Eli, Peyton, and now Arch going to University of Texas next year. Can we break some news and you can talk about how some of those guys are going to come on the show? That would kind of boost your ratings a little bit. So I actually have Archie's cell phone number, and he and I talk occasionally. He has no idea that I do this gas station review, but he would be the dream guest, and I've thought about asking him. Of course, he lives in New Orleans, and there's a lot of great places in New Orleans I could go with him. So probably when I get a little further, get a few more viewers, I'll ask Archie to do it. I really don't know the sons, or I sure don't know Arch. I have talked to Eli a couple of times. Peyton's my age. I can remember them coming to Drew when I was a kid and visiting their grandmother, who I knew very well. Archie's sister taught me in high school. So, we have a lot of obviously common people. But, he probably will end up on the show. I think he would say yes. He's such a gentleman. He's everything that you think that he is watching him on TV. Archie Manning's that guy. We had Archie speak at the NAC show 15 years ago, something like that. And when he came out, one of our members on our board of directors threw him a football. And Archie held on to it for about 3-4 seconds, and he threw it back to him, and he says, "Bad things happen when I hold on to a football too long." Great quarterback, but some of his offensive line, we got sacked a lot. But I just thought that was hysterical.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know whether he came up with it that day or he uses it in every speech. But, he was a great speaker. And then we had Peyton a couple of years ago, also great speaker, just great stories. And you can tell that they're just a fun family to be around. So 6 degrees of separation. Anybody that knows the Mannings that wants to connect people, let's get them all there on the show and drive around and visit some of the places in New Orleans or Mississippi or wherever. So how far will you travel? As I mentioned earlier, it's a tripod, a camera, and a truck. If you somehow wind up someplace where you fly, I guess you have to rent a truck, right?
Yeah, I've thought about that before, actually. Would I want to fly somewhere, rent a truck, and drive around, which would be simple enough, I guess. I've mostly driven, and I mean 1,100 miles from my house to the Dion's Quick Stop in Key West, Florida, and 1,100 miles back. And the great thing of doing it that way is that I caught a lot of places along the way. So, we made a big trip of it. We had a schedule, and we went to certain places and slept like 3 hours a night in a hotel and stuff to make different spots. But I have thought about flying places and renting a truck because that would be so much simpler.
And right now, you're roughly hitting Mississippi and the Gulf Coast. Anything that you think people you talked about Mississippi as one big small town. Are you optimistic when you visit these places that we're headed, things will be okay? Labor shortage, all these other things that we're facing, that small towns, we're still hanging in there. Gas stations with great food, things are optimistic or will be optimistic shortly.
I think, and I don't, I can speak for the South in particular, and I've been to San Antonio, Texas, as we said, all the way down to Key West. I've done a lot in Louisiana. Louisiana has some of the best gas station food in the country, some of the best food in the country. So that was a lot of fun. One of the interesting things that I found is, and this is just my thought process, but for years after World War II especially, we shipped out a lot of things that we used to do here. Mm-hmm. That seems to be turning around, especially in Mississippi. And I don't know if this is happening everywhere, but in Mississippi, you have this bespoke type industry coming back where people are making blue jeans. I mean, as a cotton farmer, growing up on a cotton farm, all the textiles were here, and then they all left and went overseas. And now that stuff is coming back, and you can go to Oxford, Mississippi, walk in, they measure you for blue jeans the way you would a suit. They stitch them, put your name in the pocket. And then there's a hat maker in South Mississippi that I'm friends with, and there's, we talked about Vine Brothers. They make all their sausage in-house. I mean, people are becoming craftsmen again. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, and I don't want to assume that it's happening everywhere, but I think it probably is, that's coming back, that people are finding passions in the stuff that they do. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, and I think it relates to what you see with a lot of trends. People want experiences, and they're willing to have something that they really feel passionate about, that fits their lifestyle, their brand, as opposed to a whole bunch of stuff. Fewer things. Try to have your kids want china cabinets with a bunch of china or something like that. So those kind of things have definitely changed, and that's cool to see that Mississippi is one of the places where you're just seeing this re-examination of how you can do things local. Final question, and just for our
I want to
viewers,
add to that just a second. Let me add to that, if I could. I think a lot about how the guy that owns Blue Delta Jean Company could make twice the money he's making right now working for Levi. And people are figuring out that money is not the answer to everything. It's a beautiful thing. You can be rich and unhappy or poor and unhappy, but they're leaving money on the table to do these things because it makes them happy. And isn't that what we all want for ourselves and our kids and everybody, is to be happy? And that's such a beautiful thing to see that happening.
And certainly we see at least one happy face when you go out on the road and you hit all these gas stations and have some of this incredible food. I would imagine the owners are just as happy to find out about it. So how can people contact you and say, hey, you know what, I got a great idea for you. Let's get together. Let's see what we can do to tell more stories and spread some happiness.
So Stafford Shurden you can literally Google my name and stuff starts coming up. But any social media, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and then you can email me, staffordshurden@gmail.com is a really easy way to get in touch with me.
We look forward to more episodes and more stories. It's great for the industry to have people like you that tell these stories, that are passionate about small businesses, growing businesses, and just telling great stories. That's what people want to hear. So thank you once again for joining us today, Stafford, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters. If you're not already a subscriber, please do so, and you'll get a new episode every week. Thanks again.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.